very excited to have you all here today. I'm going to introduce our speaker and then I'm going to stop talking. So our speaker today is Sheila Moran. So she is the Director of Communications and Marketing at First Choice Services, which is a nonprofit organization in West Virginia, manages 15 helplines, predominantly focused on behavioral health. Her responsibilities include overseeing the coordination of mass media campaigns, social media, and creative design strategy. She has a particular talent for securing earned media, and her efforts have been instrumental in enabling FCS to provide support to over 175 help seekers annually. She also enjoys giving presentations on topics such as mental health resources, problem gambling, and outreach strategies for social service organizations. She has a master's in social work. She's also a licensed social worker and certified as an internationally certified gambling counselor. So we are very excited to have her here today to present on the topic of gambling. And I am going to turn it over to her and without further ado.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to talk with you today. I was laughing as I was listening to her read my bio, which I wrote mainly, but I will admit I ran it through ChatGPT to make it better. And I laughed when it said she has a particular talent for it. I didn't write that. I left that in. So I'm just going to admit that. That sounds kind of funny. But anyway, yes, I'm Sheila Moran. I am so excited to talk to you all about problem gambling. It is, we have a lot of helplines at our agency. Some people say it is my favorite. I will just say it is the one that I know the most about. I am Director of Marketing and Communication for First Choice Services, and we operate 15 different hotlines, most of which are in West Virginia. So before I start talking about gambling, I just want to briefly mention our other programs because a lot of you are social workers, and I hope you've heard of all of these. If you haven't, give me a shout later. We could do a whole hour-long presentation on each of these. In addition to our gambling program, we have the Tobacco Quit Line, which is free nicotine replacement therapy for anyone who needs assistance to stop smoking. We do have the highest smoking rate in the country. We have the Help for WV line, which is our 24-hour helpline to get people into treatment. 25,000 calls a year on this helpline from people here in West Virginia. We can almost always get people into treatment the same day. We can do detox. We can do MAT treatment. We can do support groups, all kinds of things. We have access to qualifying people immediately for Medicaid to get treatment. Otherwise, we have forms of payment for people who are not, who do not have insurance. We have transportation assistance. So it is a fantastic program that can get people into treatment quickly. We also have the Children's Mental Health Crisis Line, Children's Crisis and Referral Line, which is part of that. And that's for anyone concerned about the behavior of their children. And we access for them in-home or outpatient behavioral health, social service, anything that they need to keep the child in the home. They do a lot of referrals with the children's mobile crisis teams as well as children's wraparound. We have the 211 program where we partner with United Way of West Virginia. I'm sure all of you social workers know about this. You know, this is for real concrete needs. We get a lot of calls from people who need help paying their utilities, their rent, their mortgage, or they want to know where is a rape crisis line or a domestic violence shelter or a food pantry. So it helps with all those things. We have the West Virginia Navigator program, which signs people up for insurance through the Affordable Care Act. So people who make too much money for Medicaid, but not old enough for Medicare and don't have private insurance. And so we sign them up for insurance. We are assisters. I'm sure you've seen the healthcare.gov. So it's that type of insurance. However, we have real life humans that help for free to sign people up because health insurance can be a little bit confusing for people. Normally you have to sign up during the open enrollment in the fall, but if you have any type of life event during the year that changes your income ratio, you can call us. One big event you're probably all aware of right now is Medicaid unwinding. So as people, some of them lose their Medicaid because they're not eligible, we are often able to sign them up for a low-cost plan, and something like 80, I'm going to mess this up, I think 87% of people get pretty significant financial subsidy for that program. The Jobs and Hope program, that's the line that helps people who have barriers to employment find jobs. We've actually hired a bunch of people at our own agency through this. In addition to answering this line, this is a great program that provides everything from helping people get something expunged from their record, to dental work, to tattoo removal, to transportation assistance, even getting a car. There is a long list of things that these employment navigators can help people with. And finally, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, the 988. I'm sure you're aware of that. We answer that here in our office. This is starting tomorrow is Suicide Awareness Month, Suicide Prevention Month. And wow, our calls went from 10,000 year before last to 15,000 last year after we changed over to 988. So we're getting a lot more chats and texts on that line, and that's working out really well. Okay, so sorry for the mandatory commercial, but as marketing director, I just can't not let the chance to go to not tell all of you social workers about all of those programs. So now I'm going to talk about, again, what I said some people say is my favorite, the gambling addiction program, the 1-800-GAMBLER program.
Sheila, before you get started, I just, one thing I forgot to ask you in the beginning when we met before this was, and this is a question in the chat, is are you willing to provide the PowerPoint slides for folks after the seminar?
Oh, sure.
Okay, good. So we'll send that out.
Gaming and Gambling in the Digital Age, Braving a New World of Addiction. I don't know how many of you remember reading this book in high school. I think my kids have read it recently, so I know they're still reading it, Brave New World. So this picture is actually probably copyright infringement right there from the Brave New World. They grew babies in incubators. I'm not going to spend too much time on the topic, but in general, a big point of the book was people that were being controlled from an external source. And a lot of the control, if you might remember, there was a little drug they gave everyone called Soma. And so everyone was on this drug, and everyone was in a relatively controlled state. And so as I go through this presentation and I'm talking about gambling and gambling addiction, and in particular, digital gaming, I want you to think about that in those terms of someone being controlled by something externally, because a lot of it really goes hand in hand. And I think you'll see that as I talk, and it is almost dystopian, I think is the word, and you'll recognize that, especially when I show you some of these videos. All right, gambling in West Virginia. I'll just talk in general. I don't know how much you know about gambling in West Virginia, how much we have. A lot of people still think we don't have much gambling in West Virginia. Spoiler alert, we have a lot of gambling in West Virginia, more per capita than most states. We are typically one of the first states to legalize and expand gambling. So how many casinos are in West Virginia? Well, you're not in person, so this might be kind of hard to do. I don't know. Does anybody know? You can put it in the chat if anybody has any idea how many casinos we have in West. Don't look it up. This is just guess. Do you know? Somebody who said 5? Who said know it all? Kidding. Nobody ever gets that right. All right, Mackenzie, you got that absolutely right. We have 5. Most people do not get that. Most people are like, what? How many? We only have like 3. So we have 5 in the state. Now, in the first couple years of our program, that was what we were getting most of our calls about. And can you guess what we were getting most of the calls about? Which type of gambling? I bet you can. Slot machines. Yes, definitely. Okay. So after those first couple years, something happened in the state. Oh, I had a bingo hall. So I'm sure, let me say that. We've got about 100 bingo halls. Hold on. And they got about 1,500 places to buy lottery tickets. Oh, and do you notice how lottery tickets are sold, by the way? Anybody old enough to remember how we used to sell cigarettes? All right. It's the same way, sold in vending machines now. So when I talk about youth gambling, keep that in mind. Now, here's what I was talking about. After the first 2 years of our program, when we were getting most of the calls from people playing slot machines at casinos, there was a change. And so we introduced video lottery terminals in the state. And this is a picture of one. I think it may still be up in Charleston. Many of them look like this. You know, a lot of times they're little aluminum buildings. Sometimes they're in the back of a bar or a pizza place. The way that you know, and it's hard to see in this picture, but if you zoom in, there's a big red sticker on the door. It says West Virginia lottery products available here. That's your signal that there are poker machines in there. Anybody have any idea how many of these establishments are in the state? Each of these have between 5 and 10 slot machines, by the way. Angela Travis, oh my gosh, you said around 1,200. You all have been through this presentation before, haven't you? Because you know what? Yeah, nobody ever gets that. It is 1,224. That's how many we have in the state, at least last count. So there's a lot of them. Pretty much on every corner. Many people aren't aware. A lot of people are like, well, I don't think we have any in my area. And I'm like, what area are you from? Because tell you, like here in Kanawha County, we have about 100 in the county. Same for Mon County. So there's probably a lot near where you live. So for the next 20 years of our program, we've had this program since the year 2000. That was what was typically people were calling us about. And it was a real different type of gambler. I'll say this a lot of times, looking at gender, most places report getting far more calls from men. We were getting more calls from women. And it was just, if there is a stereotype of a gambler, it just was absolutely not it. It was just a middle-aged, middle-class woman. A lot of times these were just people who'd gambled recreationally, and then something happened. Maybe either, got divorced or the kids went to college, they had time on their hands. And then it became a big problem for them. And it was just like, this is your mom, this is your sister. It was just not who you would imagine. And it was amazing. Way back then, I was on the helpline and listening to these stories of people who had just got sucked into it. So again, about 20 years, that was top. Now things have changed just in the last couple of years. What big thing has changed? Have you all seen these commercials everywhere for sports betting, right? So sports betting has become legal. We were one of the first states to legalize it. And you can bet in person at the casinos. However, that's not how most people do it, right? You can bet on your mobile device, right on your phone. Can anyone imagine why that might be more addictive or might become more problematic? And do we all have our phones in our hand all the time? There you go. Somebody said, yes, sure. And so now everybody has immediate access to this. Yes, it is becoming quite a big deal. In fact, it's funny. I used to tell my son, like, he couldn't, they have like poker shows on, I want to say ESPN or something. I'm like, oh, you can't watch that. It's a gambling show. But what he's really interested in sports. So ESPN is on at our house all the time. Well, so here's just a screenshot from ESPN. I mean, look at this. So basically, if you watch any sports now, you may be aware that it is now more of a gambling show with a little bit of sports thrown in. They'll have the odds all around. They'll continually talk about the wager. It is a really big part of sports betting at this part. And so the kids that are growing up now, if you just think about this compared to when you were growing up, sports betting might have been something, maybe you had an uncle who knew a guy, something, there was, of course, there was illegal sports betting, but now many people see sports as like, oh, this is something that you bet on. The whole purpose of watching this is to bet on this. Here's just to amplify that, here's a picture. I didn't do this. This one, I stole this from social media. Somebody was trying to show the difference in generations. So I'm not good with sports, but I can tell you these were both famous moments when two famous basketball players were making their, whatever it was, their 1,000th or 10,000th shot. I don't know, but it was a big deal. So you see the one on the left, you see Michael Jordan, then look at that. You see everybody watching him, right? Now look at the other picture on the right. What is the difference? They're watching, but they're using what? Every single person there has a phone in their hand. So that's different. Yeah. And so just again, when I say people are watching sports with their phones in their hand, there you go. This is a recent survey that I saw, and this is not a scientific poll. It was a men's health study. And it was actually pretty lengthy. And I just took a few things from it, but I thought it was very interesting. And it very much goes with, at least anecdotally, what we're seeing. So they ask men about their betting habits. 4 in 5 say they spend up to 6 hours a day betting, of those who said they bet. Think about that. And you might be thinking, oh no, you can't, surely not 6 hours a day. Well, I'll tell you what, I just saw a video somebody did talking about how much time kids spend on their phone, even when they're in class. And shoot, I wish I could credit who I saw that just did this. It was so good. And as part of what they were demonstrating, they just had the kids anonymously come up to the screen after their class and show their screen time. And it was like 15 hours, 16 hours. They're like, and these are kids who've been in school all day. So if we're on our phones all day long, it's not that surprising to say, yeah, 6 hours a day gambling. And then debt, nearly 1 in 5, a quarter of their paycheck to betting. 1 in 5 are or have been in some form of debt from gambling. So think about that. One of the big things that we talk about when we talk about gambling, the rules of responsible gambling, say, remember, it's just for fun. It's just for entertainment. Think of it the way you think of a movie or dinner. The money's gone, but most people are not going into debt for going to movies or dinner, right? 28% seriously considered quitting. Of those who have considered, top reasons, look at that, 18% said it's destroying their life. 43% impacting productivity. Where do you think they're getting those 6 hours a day? And most of these are working people. So certainly they're doing some of this while they're working. Affecting relationships. Oh, you better believe we get a lot of calls from angry spouses and girlfriends and parents and adult children who are seeing their loved ones spend all of their money gambling. Affecting their mood. Sure. First of all, we all know when you're spending all day on an electronic device anyway, it's affecting your mood. But imagine that not only that, but it's taking your bank account with it. Here's this is a commercial that we made for sports betting. We just did this because we really, to be honest, not that, again, I know sports betting took place, but we really never got any sports betting calls. So we didn't have a need for our first 20 years for a sports betting commercial. So we just did this a couple of years ago. This was filmed in our office, by the way, and that's our previous director's son.
The ref's calling foul play on that bet. He's double dipping into his savings. Hate to see it. Oh, you'd hate to see that. That's a block on his bank account. Oh, no, don't do it. Don't do it. That's a charge to his wife's account. Hope he likes sleeping on the couch. He takes it to the hole and boom, into the hole goes all the savings and the crowd goes wild. He'll need an assist to quit gambling. Did you know you can call 1-800-GAMBLER for help? Don't be beat by a game. The refs call.
Sorry. What'd you think of that last part? Assist. Wasn't that clever? I had to ask my son to give me a list of basketball terms so I could figure out how to incorporate those into a commercial. So we tried to be a little cute with that. Our commercials, and really for all of our helplines, do tend to be a little bit heavier. So we tried to be a little bit lighter, tried to be attention getting, and we ran that during a lot of sports games last year, a lot of football. That was our basketball one. We did one for football as well. Okay, so in addition to sports betting, new types of gambling. So I have the picture of Robinhood here. Why do I have that? Who's heard of the Robinhood app? I don't know what that is. So it's e-trading. Trading has been around for a long time. And as long as I've been in this field, there's been a debate. It's stock market gambling. So, you get a lot of different answers, and it kind of boils down to a nuance. There's a big difference in taking your money and investing it or giving it to an investment professional and having it grow over the years versus something that you're doing yourself and you're getting a high and a low, something very quick. Day trading is definitely different from that. So day trading is very quick. And what happened a couple of years ago, Robinhood, was in the news a lot. It was one of those meme stocks everybody was buying into, got a lot of attention. So a lot of people were using it. You could use it for free to make trades. So even kids, and this is something I know my kids were telling me, people at their school are walking around with this and, thinking they're all stock geniuses because they're making these trades. And so a lot of people don't think of this as gambling, but it definitely very much can be. We had a guy who worked here for us, and he said he didn't even realize it, but he's walking around, he's getting these push notifications constantly, like, well, buy this, go high, go low, do this, do that. And so you're kind of being controlled by this. And he's like, I'm recognizing now that this is the same high, the same way that you would get from gambling. So is it gambling? Well, you can decide, but again, if it's affecting you in this way, it very likely is gambling or type of gambling. And certainly it's something that anyone who has risk factors for gambling addiction, which I'll talk about, or anyone who's in recovery from gambling addiction, may be something that you want to stay away from. Online gambling. Oh my gosh. So, wow, look at all these ads. This is really hard for us to compete with. What do you notice about all these ads? Look at this. We've got famous people, well-known people, beautiful women, lots of glitz and glamour, and every single one of them gives you free money. Doesn't that sound great? So is it really free money? Well, somebody's saying, no, when you see this, and especially if you're young, wouldn't you maybe think somebody is going to give you free money? But no, usually it's a sort of a deposit match, and you've got to spend the money. No one's actually giving you a check for this, but a lot of people misunderstand this for sure. Oh, somebody says the PowerPoint screens aren't changing. Oh no. Does everybody who sees my online gambling screen? Okay, I have a guy raising his hand. Good. All right, is anybody else? Okay, I see other people seeing. Okay, gosh, I don't know why. Sorry. So, yeah, this is a really big deal. Something that now, so I told you sports gambling kind of started taking over the last couple of years. In the last year, for the first time, I think is going to completely beat out the VLTs, is going to be online gaming. So this is gambling that can be it can be poker, it can be slot machines. Really, it's a lot of games that maybe you would have seen anyway on your phone in the past. And a lot of times they call these social casinos, meaning you could put money into it and you would get prizes or extra time for doing well, but you wouldn't actually get money deposited in your account. When this became legal a couple of years ago, they became real casinos, meaning that you had the incentive that it was indeed possible that they could be depositing money back into your account. And of course, that does happen sometimes. However, as you can imagine, all this advertising costs a lot of money, right? I can't even, I wish I had a good figure on how much money is spent on advertising this. If you look at television ads and billboards and digital ads, it is a many millions of dollars just here in West Virginia. So you might make money doing this, but it's somebody else is making a lot more money to be able to do all of this advertising. Just a note here talking about cryptocurrency. Boy, I am probably the last person to explain cryptocurrency to you all. We actually have a guy we bring in who's a lot smarter than me who can explain it better. I think what is important for you to know is that a lot of people do use it on the internet and that it can be untraceable. And when we talk about people trying to hide their gambling, I mean, this is kind of an easy, if I were a gambler, this is the way I would do it. And when we talk about kids being able to gamble, this is another way that kids sometimes can use this type of untraceable currency. And so this is used a lot online for gambling. And if you've been following the news, you know that cryptocurrency in itself, a lot of people would call gambling because a lot of people, were putting a lot of money into it and it sort of all fell apart. Non-fungible token. Have you heard of these? The NFTs. You see a lot of stories about these. Somebody paid a ridiculous amount of money for a JPEG of a painting of something. And that seems wild, right? But this is, again, it's not, you may not exactly call this gambling, but it's the digital world that we're living in. And it's important to understand that these digital assets, artwork, recording, etc., mean a lot to people. So when we look at different types of games that people play, I mean, this is maybe kind of generational, I think, but a lot of maybe the newer generation, these are things that are as valuable to them as maybe in my generation, people would look at, the car you drive or the house you live in. And so this is, it's a different world for sure. I talked a little bit about this, is it really gambling or not? A lot of times it kind of depends on how you are experiencing it. So with all of this type of gambling, a lot of people ask me, oh, I'm sorry, let me see, this is, is it secure? Is it, is it regulated? Well, that's, some of it is, some of it isn't. Certainly, if you're looking at West Virginia lottery products, that is highly secure and highly regulated. Some of these things online, not so much. Used to be when you would bet, it would be like you're taking a big chance online. You're going to bet in an offshore place. Somebody's going to have an account in the Cayman Islands. You may or may not get your money. That's really not the way it works now, because all of these, those ads I just showed you, those are all, Caesars, BetMGM. These are all land casinos here in the country that have these services available. So certainly it would be considered more secure than it used to be, and definitely more regulated. Now, that does not mean that completely safe or that kids can't do it. One of the things, I think I have the video here. The metaverse. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I have a very brief video. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I don't know how many of you have heard of the metaverse. And this is something that I think is interesting. When I talk to people, there is a big divide. Younger people especially all raise their hands that they know about this, and a lot of older people have not. And it is not Facebook. People know that Facebook renamed themselves Meta, but that's just because they wanted to be part of this metaverse. So the metaverse is much bigger than that. And there are a lot of casinos in the metaverse. There's a lot of everything, and a lot of it runs on cryptocurrency in the metaverse. And so even though this presentation is not specifically on youth gambling, and when I do talk about youth gambling, keep in mind that this is something, this is a way that kids can experience gambling, because this is completely unregulated. All right, this is a short video. Again, I am not going to show you the whole thing.
Sheila, I'm not getting any audio. I don't know if other folks are.
There's no audio? Did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, you know what? It's just music. So.
Oh, now it's going.
Okay, again, I won't go through the whole thing, but you kind of get the point, right? That's something that a lot of people spend a whole lot of time in, the metaverse. And this is a casino in the metaverse where you can use cryptocurrency to gamble, where no one is checking your ID there. And so this is, again, something that a lot of people now are growing up with, seeing this in their daily life. So that's certainly something different than years ago, for sure. I mentioned regulation. So just this is always controversial, right? Should all of this be regulated or not regulated? And we're having this debate way back when video poker machines were made legal in the year 2000. People said reduce, restrict, and regulate. And so some people would say that worked, and some people would say, well, now there's a whole lot more people using it than were using it before. And then some people would say, yeah, but they are using it, but it's safer. So we are gambling neutral. So I'm not telling you which way it should be, but just to kind of look at all sides of it. And you think about any kind of activity, you're talking about, marijuana, alcohol, sex work, anything like that. When there's a lot of money generated, there are going to be efforts to reduce, restrict, and regulate. The positive side of that is when you do that, you certainly have a lower risk. You can have more age regulation, and it generates a lot of taxes. We have a really big portion of our budget here in West Virginia generated by gambling taxes. The negative side, of course, is more users. I mean, again, I know that there was people would make offshore bets or people would find a bookie to bet on sports, but that was not nearly as common. I mean, just look around your daily life. How many people do you know now that bet on sports? I went to a picnic the other day and I just walked into the middle of this conversation about people with their phones up talking about betting on sports. And of course, I walk in, I had just done a TV interview on like the dangers of digital betting. People are like, oh no, here she comes, don't talk about it anymore. But you know, that's just something you didn't hear as much about certainly more years ago. So you have a lot more people using, so you do have more risk of addiction. It's just the math. So here's some of our helpline data. We do this every year. We compile our data, and this was done, I think it was the year before last. So video terminals still at the top, but we did it this year. It's going to look a little bit different. That internet gambling, non-sports is going to go to the top of it, I believe, this year. You can see we don't get a whole lot of calls for dog or horse racing. We are, by the way, I think the only state that still has dog racing, but we don't get very many calls about that. I don't think there's that many people watching it. Don't get very many calls about people doing bingo, things like that, but it still certainly happens. You notice we have video gaming there. We don't get so many calls for that, but that is definitely an emerging issue, and I'll talk about why that is later. So just a word, what is problem gambling? Yeah, I've talked about gambling. I've talked about, you know, some of the stats. I mean, most people, I can't off the top of my head, I can't remember, something like 86% of West Virginians have gambled at some point in the last year. It's very, very common. You know that in your daily life. Most people, if you count gambling as even buying a lottery ticket, most people certainly have gambled. But most people do not develop a gambling addiction, thankfully. So what is a gambling addiction? Well, it means that you keep doing it even though bad things are happening to you because of it. So it's not a money amount. Notice we don't say if you spend 10,000, if you spend 20,000, you know, it's not like that. It's very similar to substance use. You know, it's not, well, if you drink 10 beers, 20 beers, you drink a fifth. It's not how much you drink. It's what bad, you know, you've got a DUI and your wife left you and you're still drinking. Even if that's one beer a night, that's a problem, right? So same thing with gambling. A lot of people want to say, well, but I'm paying my bills, or I'm able to, you know, haven't gotten any legal trouble. Well, not yet, but are some bad things happening to you? A lot of people say, well, like there are people with money, and I'm trying to think of some examples. Oh, gosh, there have been some famous people lately who was it? Was it Charles Barkley? I think he was the one that kind of went on the record with how many millions he'd spent on gambling. And so a lot of times, oh, and of course, the famous West Virginia example, right? Jack Whitaker, somebody who was already super rich. And so a lot of people say, well, you got so much money, you can't become, you know, addicted to gambling because you're going to have so much money to bail you out. And I always say that's not true. It just takes a little bit longer to get to the bottom of that pile. Or, you know, again, there are other consequences. Sometimes it's more about the time you're spending. I mean, look at Pete Rose might be another good example of that. You know, it's not always about the money. So what are some of these reasons that some people become addicted and others don't? There are several different, this has been studied a lot. I would say, you know, the biggest issue is if you have prior history of other addictions. In fact, we have a lot of people in recovery who tell us that they were recovering from alcohol or drugs, and then they never considered gambling to be an issue. In fact, if you go to some recovery events, you'll even sometimes see raffles or gambling taking place. So that is a big issue. Having a significant life event, you know, I mentioned the person who was gambling recreationally and then got a divorce or got a serious illness, something happened, and then it became problematic because they're using gambling as an escape. Having a big early win. That sounds like fun, right? Everybody wants to win. But many of our callers tell us that when they win big, especially early on, that they end up feeling like they're chasing that for the rest of their life. You know, it's not just the money, it's the feeling, the high of winning that money. So that can be an issue for a lot of people. There are 9 symptoms of gambling addiction. You do not have to have all 9. Most people have several of these by the time they call us, certainly on 1-800-GAMBLER. So trying unsuccessfully to cut back. We are never anyone's first call the first time they think that they need to gamble less. So usually people have tried on their own. Returning to get their losses back. So chasing their losses. A lot of people will say, you know, I took, you know, $100 in, and this was my money for this. I didn't mean to spend it, but I lost it. And so then I had to go to the ATM. I had to go back out and get another $100, which really should have went towards my rent, but I had to put it in to get that first 100 back. And you can see where I'm going with this, that it's a hole that just keeps getting dug deeper and deeper. Lying to friends and family members. So, most people who call us tell us that their family is not aware of the extent of their gambling. I'll go further than this and say that a lot of people lie to themselves. If you talk to anyone who gambles, it's going to be rare that you hear somebody say, I just kind of suck. I'm just not very good at it. I just keep losing money. Usually they'll say, I'm kind of good at it and I win a lot. And then, back to remember how much money I told you the bazillions spent on advertising, not to mention these big, beautiful land casinos. It's funny how everybody's making money, but that really is pretty unlikely that everybody is making money. So there's a lot of lying to themselves. Gambling feeling the need to bet more and more. So nobody starts out with like, I'm going to drop my whole paycheck on gambling. People start out exactly what we tell them to do. Okay, I'm going to spend X amount and that's the only money I'm going to spend and I'm going to stick to it. We always say set a limit and stick to it. The setting the limit is the easy part. The sticking to it is the hard. And so once you get to that point where you're feeling the need to bet more and more, that can be an issue. Gambling to escape problems. I mentioned the person who's, the widow who has time on her hands and she's depressed. People will tell us that, I sat in that stool for hours and I just didn't even feel the pain. I wasn't even thinking about it. Think about yourself, how much, do you ever get distracted or lonely or bored or anxious and you sit and you scroll through your phone? Okay, so it's similar, but a lot of money wrapped up in it. So you're concentrating on doing one very specific thing, not just scrolling. Receiving a bailout. A lot of people tell us that friends or family have bailed them out. Now, nobody ever asks for money for gambling. No one will ever say, hey, would you give me, $5,000 because I blew it on gambling? No, people are going to say, oh my gosh, I need some money for groceries. I'm behind in my rent. Can you help me out? And we always tell family members, please stop bailing them out. Usually people will tell us that the thing that eventually got them into treatment was realizing no one around them was going to bail them out anymore. Thinking about gambling often. So everyone has a system, right? Everyone that calls us, and they wouldn't be calling us if that system worked. And you think about systems in terms of if you're a sports bettor or a poker player, you might be thinking, well, there's some strategy there, and you can see where you're spending some time thinking about that. But it's not just that. Even if someone's playing a slot machine, which has absolutely no skill, by the way, a lot of people have a misconception about playing slot machines and video poker machines. And if they're really good at it, they can win money. When in reality, it's operated by a random number generator. So nothing you can do will change that. Same thing with things like bingo and lottery tickets. However, every one of those people do have a system, a strategy that they think about. It can be, I'm going to wear my lucky lipstick. I'm going to tap it 3 times. I'm only going to play this machine. I'm going to hit the max 3 times in a row, almost OCD like. I saw a billboard the other day and had one of those, remember the troll dolls with the big fuzzy hair? And the billboard, it was for a casino, and it said something like, some people believe in luck, but some have a strategy, or something like that. Anyway, they were saying like bringing your troll doll would be a strategy, which really is not going to affect it. But believe me, a lot of people have that thinking with gambling. That's how gambling is a little bit different than other types of addiction. A lot of people say addiction is addiction. Yes, to some extent. However, with gambling, a lot of people are very wrapped up in the myths. Generally when somebody says, okay, I'm relapsing, going back to drinking beer, they don't necessarily have they know what's going to happen. They don't have a dream that that's going to transform their life. With gambling, a lot of people do. Jeopardizing relationships. I mentioned people calling us not very happy. People called and said, I just looked at our 401k and we had all this money to retire. And turns out my wife forged my signature and took it all out so she could gamble it all. Or, oh my gosh, my husband went and got a second mortgage without my knowledge. Or, wow, we're, $200,000 in debt and I didn't even know it. So it can be very devastating to relationships. when older people gamble, we've gotten calls from adult children who are saying, they don't have money now for assisted living, or, if they're going to need in-home care, that sort of thing, because they've spent it all on gambling. So, yeah, family certainly call us being very upset. Feeling restless or irritable. This is like a withdrawal type symptom. If you have a kid and you've ever like restricted them on the time they're allowed on their iPhone or iPad and took it from them and seen how angry and upset they get, some kids, or maybe it's just my kids, but think about that as an adult. However, imagine having all of your savings and all of your worldly possessions wrapped up in that machine and somebody's taking it from you. So definitely restless and irritable. And with gambling, when you quit, that's not the end of the journey, because you actually lose something. You lose the fantasy that you're going to be able to recover all that money, because while people are gambling, that's what they're thinking. But once you quit, you realize that you're going to have to get serious and do some debt counseling. I have the symptoms of video game addiction here. I'm not going to go into all of these, but what I want you to notice is that they are almost exactly the same as the symptoms of gambling addiction. If you would overlay them, they're almost identical. So why do I have symptoms of gaming addiction when I'm talking about gambling addiction? Well, there has been a real convergence of gaming and gambling, and a whole lot of people who are spending time online have noticed that they're almost indistinguishable. A lot of the gambling now looks like gaming and vice versa. One of the things that we find, this is kind of an easy early way for young people to get hooked, is loot boxes. Who knows what a loot box is? Just give me a yes. Does anybody know offhand what a loot box is? Okay, we got one yes, two yeses. All right, and a head shake. Good. Most of the time, I would say when I do this, probably a clue, right, Gwen? Me either. Until I did this, probably 3/4 of people had no clue. Usually, it was the younger people who would know what this is. So, this is a brief example of a loot box.
Here's a box.
Can you hear that?
We're not going to tell you what's inside. It might be something kind of awesome. Then again, it might not. How much would you pay to find out? Every day, people, including kids, are spending millions of dollars to open boxes just like this, all in the hope of winning big. If you think that sounds like gambling, you're not alone. They're called loot boxes, and they've become one of the most controversial aspects of the video game industry. Here's how a loot box works. As a player progresses through a game, they're rewarded with loot. That's the name used to describe in-game items, things such as weapons or cosmetic perks that can help you customize your character's appearance. You could give them a hat, a shiny new sword, or some other accessory to dress them up for fun. You can earn loot by doing well at the game, or by earning currency that you find along the way. Now you've got money to spend at the in-game store. Sometimes these stores are designed to sell just one thing, loot boxes. Think of it as a mystery box. What you get for your virtual cash is a surprise. And like most surprises, there's an element of chance. If you think that sounds similar to gambling, you're not wrong. Like poker machines, loot boxes use sound and visual effects to create a buzz of excitement and anticipation. Pokies and loot boxes also dangle small rewards in front of the player, while at the same time tempting them with the potential to hit the jackpot. Because some loot or rewards are more common than others, certain items appear frequently. Others are prized for how rare they are. All this triggers a surge of dopamine in the player's brain, giving them that feel-good rush that keeps them coming back again and again. Players who use their virtual cash to buy loot boxes can never be quite sure if they'll unwrap something rare and desirable or an item that's common and useless. The in-game currency or points you use to buy loot can take a long time to build up, but there is a way to take the fast track for a chance at those rare treasures. Forget about make-believe coins and gems. You can spend real money instead. It's much faster to use actual money to exchange for more loot boxes. One report estimated that in 2018, players around the world spent more than $40 billion on loot boxes. And a survey run by the UK's Gambling Commission found that nearly 1/3 of children aged 11 to 16 spent money on them. But can buying loot boxes really be considered gambling? Well, it depends who you ask.
There are now
Long words.
Okay.
Here's
I'll have to cut it short because it goes on a bit, but now you know what a loot box is. And many, if not most, games have some type of something like this inside of it. Almost all games have microtransactions, which is, of course, pay to play. You know, you're going to get an extra level or a new outfit for your character, etc., when you pay a little bit. And that is not gambling, although it certainly is getting people used to the idea of paying a little bit on their mobile device to get something. Remember when I talked about something non-tangible, getting them used to that. And this generation certainly is. However, the loot boxes are a step up. So you're actually literally paying for a chance. So you may or may not get the thing you want. And that is what makes it gambling. So why am I talking about gaming? Again, gaming and gambling has converged a lot. Now that when you see people playing games, you have no idea if they're gambling or not. A lot of these gambling platforms look a whole lot like the gaming platforms and vice versa. There's a big social element. We have a lot of people spend time gambling. They go to casinos or video poker places and their friends are there, or they're in a fantasy league with all of their friends. Well, it's the same thing with gaming. A lot of kids are, on the same platform together. So it becomes social. So again, that's another challenge with stopping. And it's similar with other addiction. A lot of people say, well, my friends were users. Now I'm in recovery. I'm going to have to give up those friends. Well, so, again, if all of your friends are at the same place and you get into recovery and you're not gambling, then you're at a point where you may be leaving behind some of your social support system. Oh, sorry. The psychology of games, I just think this is a good quote to keep in mind. The game developers use principles of psychology to make their game as addictive as possible. Once the reward centers of your brain are activated, free games will ask you to buy virtual credits or new lives to keep playing or unlock new features, and these microtransactions can add up quickly. So think of this in terms of gambling as well. When I talk to kids in groups, I always say, who wants to work in video game development? Everybody thinks that'd be a cool field to work in. I say, what are some of the degrees that you would need for a field like that? And people are like, oh, computer programming or, IT, this, that. And I'm like, yeah, those are all good, but you forgot about an important degree, psychology. Who do you think designs these machines? Some ways that video gaming and gambling can convince you to keep doing the thing. Guilt. I don't know if y'all remember, I always forget the name of this. It's some sort of a game, it's different iterations. They have like a little puppy or something. And sometimes it's a plant and you've got to go back and put some money in to feed it every day. And if you don't, you'll get a little note that says, oh, sorry, your puppy's going to die if you don't keep doing this. So, that's a way that games get you, certainly, people feeling guilty, so they're going to go back. Seeing this with gambling too. I did a training at a video poker place, and some of the workers there told me that when people didn't come in for so long, they would send them a note like, "Hey, Mabel, we miss you." Those folks get big tips when people play, so they want their customers to keep coming in. I talked about social status. Gosh, yeah. So this is, it's the new, when I was in school, it was, who's wearing the cool blue jeans or tennis shoes. And now everybody, one of the things kids talk about is what skin are you using in your game? Like what level are you? What kind of weapon do you have? Sunk cost fallacy. So this is something that you see on video games as well as gambling when, somebody might say, well, yeah, I'd like to quit, but gosh, I've been doing this I've already put $10,000 into this machine. I can't possibly move. It wouldn't make sense for me to get up now, would it? Somebody playing video games, I've spent 15 hours trying to get to this level. I can't just give up now. The near miss, you'll see this a lot, like 2 cherries and almost a cherry. Nope, 2 cherries and a lemon. Darn it, almost did. You see that in video games as well. And that, of course, plays on your psychologies. You want to go, well, I almost had it. It was so close. And are those on purpose? There's some debate about that in the gambling world. Makes kind of sense, doesn't it? Because it is a good psychological technique. Friendly reminders. Did you forget about us? Similar to the guilt, you'll get push notifications on your phone. Like, it's been a while. Hey, well, $10 for free just for coming back. Freebies. Again, when I talk to kids, they're familiar with this concept from drug addiction education. The first hit is always free. I remember I mentioned those $1,000 free money that they're going to give you. Remember, there's a reason it's always free. And what do we do? How do we help people who have a gambling addiction? Oh my gosh, I only have like 8 minutes to tell you really quickly about this amazing program that we've had for 20 years. I'll talk really quick. So we have a 24/7 hotline, and we do a lot of things with it. I'll first say we do a lot of prevention. Obviously, that's best to stop it before it starts. A lot of states have mandated education in schools for gambling addiction education. We do not have that here. We'd love to have it. So we don't have that yet, but we have a dozen or so groups that we fund, a lot of SAD groups or FRN groups that go in and talk to kids about gambling. We give them training, and they use an evidence-based curriculum to talk to them about that. We do a lot of training, not only just events like this, but we train a lot of counselors, a lot of professionals to treat gambling addiction. By the way, and I'm sure I'll give you my contact information at the end. If any of you are interested in becoming professional gambling addiction treatment folks, and that would include probably gaming addiction as well, you may be interested in becoming part of our network. We usually do a yearly training. We're going to do it largely online this year, and you can drop me a note if you're interested. These are not employees, but these are contracted people we pay to see our folks to do assessments and to do treatment. And we do a lot of stuff with the helpline, the 1-800-GAMBLER line. You ever wonder what happens when you call that? Well, we have live human beings who answer that 24 hours a day. We have about 50 counselors who receive training from us specifically on how to help people stop gambling. We always pay for the first appointment, but if they can't pay, we can pay for up to 20 sessions for gamblers, 10 for their loved ones. We do a lot of self-help here. A lot of people, maybe even more so than in our substance use line, are hesitant for professional counseling. So we give them a lot of information, everything from podcasts on recovery to book recommendations. We email them or mail them books on how to stop gambling. We give them self-exclusion information. You can't exclude yourself from the 5 casinos, or you can also get software. If you see one of our counselors, we can get that to you for free that can block gambling from your mobile device and your laptop. We refer to support groups. There's not a ton of Gamblers Anonymous around, but we have a few. We refer to those, but we also have a couple of in-person counselor-led support groups. We have a wellness online group we do. There's actually quite a lot of social media and telephone online support groups that we refer to. We have a retreat weekend, which is our favorite weekend of the year. We love doing that. This is where it's our only helpline where we actually see people in person. So once a year, we invite anyone who's called us to come and bring a loved one. And it's a nice weekend of fellowship and recovery. Something else we're doing, we're just now launching, is a peer support network. I'm very excited about that. We're actually going to we're going to contract with some peers. So if you know anyone who has experience in gambling addiction, they're in recovery, and they're interested in getting paid to share their experience and talk with others, we are looking for those folks. That's something we're launching just this week. And I think that information is on our website, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Okay, some takeaways. I do want to tell you that if you are interested, if you work anywhere, you're part of a civic group or a recovery group or anywhere, and you would like me or one of our folks to come in, either in person or on Zoom, and talk to you all about gambling addiction or youth gambling addiction, we are happy to do that. Or all those other programs I mentioned before, we're happy to do presentations on those. We would love to send you any information. If you work somewhere and you would like to put up a poster, again, I will put my, my email here, because if you all are interested in that, we have a whole lot of posters. We always say that they're doing no good at all gathering dust in our storage room. So if you want posters on any of our programs that I mentioned, including gambling, just send me a note and I will happily mail those to you. Or again, if you're interested in a presentation, or you're interested in becoming part of our treatment network, or you're someone in recovery yourself and you're interested in becoming part of our peer network. Okay, I think I got through it all in an hour. I could talk about this all day, but I better be quiet. Let me see if there's anything through here. Oh, somebody said Tamagotchi. That's it. Thank you, Maggie. I always forget the name of that. That's the are you sure you're okay with your pet dying game. Looking through the chats. Oh, thank you. Somebody sent a story on Iowa football players gambling on themselves. You know, that was a big scandal. And I'll be honest, well, you all are what a WVU people. I'll just say this. I am surprised and pleased that no one at WVU has suggested doing this, because a lot of colleges have partnered with gambling companies now. You know how when I was in college, they used to have all the credit card people around on campus trying to get you to sign up. So now a lot of campuses have partnered with gambling companies. So you're going to see like DraftKings at your student center trying to sign you up for that. So good for WVU, or Marshall hasn't done that yet.
Thank you, Sheila. This was a great presentation, and we have a couple minutes left. So if folks have some last minute questions, you can type them in the chat. In the meantime, I just want to remind folks that we do have a brief evaluation survey. I put a link to that in the chat, but I will put it in again so it's kind of pops up. So if you have a few minutes to fill that out before you go today, that would be great. You'll also get a link with your CE certificate too. But does anybody have any last minute questions for Sheila? Somebody mentioned the addiction machine video is available on YouTube.
Oh, I'll look that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so well, thank you, Sheila, and thank you everyone who was here today. We really appreciate you attending. We appreciate you presenting. And please keep an eye open for future Lunch and Learns, and we'll see you throughout the semester.
Thank you all.